Go Electric here. Now, if you have not seen my channel before, I want to give a brief introduction here because I have reviewed over 100 e-bikes and e-mobility devices, but recently I graduated to riding on electric motorcycles and I got my endorsement. So I've been really excited about that. But during that process, I did a lot of research and trying to honing which electric motorcycle I was really interested in. And I found one that there was a really great value proposition here, and the brand is called Ryvid. And I actually rode the Ryvid Anthem for over 300 miles and did a full detailed review. So if you want to check that out, I'll put a link in the description below. I also want to take a peek behind the curtain and learn a little bit more about the brand itself because it's so unique. So today I'm really excited to introduce Tran, who is the CEO and the founder of Ryvid. And so welcome, Dong. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey Lacey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it was a treat to ride around on the Ryvid Anthem for quite a bit of time, and we went over 300 miles, and it was a blast. And what motivated you to take on the challenge of starting an electric motorcycle brand? Because that seems like a big feat.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So initially, I don't think the idea was to create an electric motorcycle brand. It was actually to look at transportation as a whole. Right? I grew up in Vietnam where the way we got around is essentially on two wheels. There's no cars over there, right? Everything was either scooters, bicycles, or motorcycles. And so coming here was a bit of a shock where starting, I grew up in upstate New York where it snowed during the winters, and so we had a specific use case for motorcycles, right? It was only during the summer, nice weathers. It wasn't used to commute or do your everyday errands like how we use it in Vietnam. So it got me thinking. Ever since I moved here, is like how do we, no, how do we transition people to use more two wheelers, like more bicycles, more motorcycles, more scooters, because ultimately that is the most efficient way to get around. Besides, just walking yourself. That's the genesis of Rivet and what we were looking at. It's finding a way of getting around that is ultimately the most efficient vehicle for electric or really any motor transportation, right? So
Well, yeah, and that also brings up the question is why did you choose electric? Because you could have gone in the direction of having just a gas-powered motorcycle, but you chose to go electric. So that's very fascinating to me. What made you decide that?
yeah, so I think opportunity, right? I think my first time on electric motorcycle was back in 2016. I spent my whole life riding gas bikes, and I didn't think I would like it, right? And after riding my first electric motorcycle was actually a zero, it kind of changed my whole perception on what it meant to be electric. And previously, I thought it's going to be boring. It's not going to make any sound. The performance is not going to be great. I'm going to miss all of those things. After I wrote the zero, all of that changed. Like a thing in my head kind of clicked. More like this is, it's not. There's no comparison, right? It's just a better way of doing something that I love, which is being on two wheels, and it's a very different thing. It's not like you can compare it to having a big Ducati gasoline powered bike that makes a lot of sound, and there's a lot of things you have to do. It's a whole different way to enjoy it. So that's where I got my feeling from experiencing electric, and ultimately looking at electric and being able to work on some of these electric motorcycles. I realized another thing where it's extremely simple to work on an electric motorcycle, right? There's no engine. There's a motor that has a couple of moving parts. There's a battery, and then there's a motor controller. And it's a whole different way of looking at manufacturing, of looking at how people interact with their machines. And I saw that as an opportunity to really help reduce costs, get people to travel around a more efficient way. And then on top of that, being EV, I think that's generally where we're headed, right? As a species, I think we're looking at EVs as a more efficient way to get around. And until there's a better solution, that's where we are.
Yeah, and so can you clarify a little bit more of your background before you were starting Rivet and what you were doing and how that kind of pertains to giving you the opportunity to start this brand?
Yeah, so I grew up in upstate New York. Like I said, my first degree was actually mechanical engineering. So I went through engineering school first. I did some work on automotive design, but it was more on the engineering side, which got me to thinking what I actually wanted to do was become a car designer, right? In a way where I'm more responsible for the way that the vehicle looks and how people interact with the vehicle, the UI UX. And so I went to a school in Detroit, College for Creative Studies, and got an entirely different degree for automotive design, right? And that's where I got into the design side of what I was interested in. I got my degree there for transportation design, and then went to school out in sorry, got my first job in California working for Honda. And Honda's background. They started out doing electric bicycles, right? That's
Mm.
ultimately the moped was started by Mr. Honda, and how the transition of Honda becoming a car company, right? An airplane company. They're making robots. They're doing all sorts of things now. But where they started was ultimately just an electric bicycle. That was very inspirational for me. And this kind of speaks to my love of two wheels and what I think is the most efficient way to get around. After Honda, I went to a company called Icon Aircraft, where it was a complete startup. I was very early to Icon and saw all of the different ways of growing the company and going into production, delivering product. Uh, after I left Icon, I started my own company. It was a product design consultancy where we did a lot of the work that I was doing at Icon and Honda for different clients. Saw a whole different side of, okay, product development, from design to engineering to production design, and doing branding, doing strategy for them. That's kind of what led up to, okay, if I can do this for other people, let's see if I can do some of this for myself and start a company uh, doing something that I really like and enjoy. And that's how Ryvid got its start.
Well, and that's incredible because, well, I'm a little biased, but I'm a Michigander and I'm just north of Detroit. And I know very well that the College of Creative Studies is a very prestigious place and a well-known
Mhm.
place here for a lot of talent that comes out of Michigan and obviously from New York too, with in your
Yeah,
case. But that is really cool to hear and fascinating to hear also that your background is compilation of so many different areas that would allow you to have an opportunity to see it from so many different industry and bring it together into your own company. So I'm sure there were some challenges, especially at the start of getting it ramped up and everything like that. So can you touch on a little bit of those challenges that were the most hard to overcome at the beginning? And now you've been operating for years. So what are the current challenges you're facing right now in comparison?
for sure. So there are many different challenges, and I can break them down. So the first challenge was, initially when we started, we were a very small company. We had four people on the team. So we essentially bootstrapped, and we got together and used resources on our own to make essentially prototypes, right? But we made prototypes that we can go out and raise money with. That's the first challenge. Okay, how do we raise enough money to actually get there? um, Once we got across that barrier, like we received the grant money from the state of California, which really helped get us to the next level on how fast we can move. The next one was, okay, how do we manufacture a bike? How do we design a bike that can be easily made here in California and still be profitable? What type of process did we go to? Once we decided that, okay, folded sheet metal, that's how we're going to do our frame. The next challenge was, okay, who has done folded sheet metal and how did they do it and was it successful? We couldn't really find any production vehicle on two wheels that has done that at scale before. So we were starting from scratch, right? We didn't have anything to go off of. So the challenge for manufacturing was the biggest challenge. Our ability to really start iterating on the different frame designs. We did 8 different frame iterations in about 2 months, right? And
Wow.
the reason we were able to do this is because of the process. We laser cut our frame on a flat sheet of metal, and then we bend it. We bend it cold. That means we can test out frames, iterate on them, go out and try things very quickly, right? Very quickly find out, okay, this doesn't work, this works. That allowed us to iterate on something and test something to the point where we're comfortable enough to put it into production and deliver it to customers. That's the biggest challenge. All of that took us about 8 months, and that's with a very small team. Like, I think we had 7 or 8 people at the time, and 8 months to get something from essentially a prototype to a serial production vehicle, right, in the state of California, with the factory, with everything involved, and that ultimately was the biggest challenge. Now, where we are now, I think we have delivered product to customers. We're in all but 4 or 5 states, right? So we have products everywhere. That is a challenge, right? It's like, okay, now people have our product. Now we really find out what the issues are, right? Whatever we have tested, whatever we try to guess or think about, we now actually have data on. And it, you've experienced some of this with our product, right? It's like we can't get to you back to you fast enough on even small issues, right? So the team is constantly uh, making sure that the customer has a good experience with our product, triaging on, okay, what's really important and what's not that important, and trying to figure out, we need to keep our customers happy. That is our biggest challenge right now. Keep our customer happy, making sure that our products are safe in the field, and getting as much feedback as we can, and doing a very direct feedback loop, right? To customer experience, back to production methods, back to design, and how to go back to the customer with the right info, and make sure that they're happy. That is our current biggest challenge. And
Now,
that's going to continue to increase, right, as we go
Ye
forward.
Oh, for sure, and so what is so fascinating about this is the fact that, you mentioned that you gotta be profitable, and the price point of your products are about $6,000,
Hmm.
$6,500, and that was a recent price drop within months that you made because you had some manufacturing efficiencies, if that was,
Hmm.
what I read correctly, but,
Yeah.
a lot of the electric motorcycles that I have driven in showrooms across, my state and several others, whether it's BMW, Livewire, or Zero, like you had mentioned earlier, there are some advantages there because they have dealerships, so brick and mortar, where people can go and see the products there and test drive them and things like that. So,
Hmm.
uh, you guys don't necessarily have that same retail presence as the others, but uh, it's an incredible price point that you're at. So, how do you envision Ryvid reaching larger audiences while also keeping that price point very competitive? Because that seems like there's some balance there. And as you're talking about keeping customers happy, that's got to be a really difficult choice to make to not go into those retail storefronts like the other guys.
Yeah, 100%. And this has been a topic of conversation ever since we started the company. We go dealers or we go direct to consumer. Ultimately, we made the decision to go direct to consumer, and the biggest three biggest reasons for that is our price point, right? Our price point, we always intended to be around where we are now. At launch, we were $7,800 because we didn't know where our cost was going to land, right? We wanted to make sure we are at least starting out profitable. Once we figured that out, we had to raise our prices because our costs ended up being a little bit higher. We added things like a fast charger, right? The 3.3 kilowatt charger was never intended to be on the bike, but we knew that would make the experience better. So we added that, increasing the cost by $1,000 essentially. Once we were able to work down the cost with our efficiencies in manufacturing and where we get our parts and supply chain from, we were able to reduce the cost back down. But it doesn't include, what we would have to pay dealers, what we'd have to pay
Mhm.
retailers, distributors to distribute our product. The That's one of the biggest reasons why we have avoided that. But it, again, like you're saying, it gives a different type of experience for people, right? And one of the ways we're trying to overcome that is we have an affiliate program. So our customers become our best salespeople, right? They go out and they love the product already. They know a lot about it. They can go out and speak pretty fluently on what our product is to potential customers. So as a customer, you could reach out to us and, hey, is there an affiliate near me, and we could hook you up with that person. The second way we're doing is we have partners around the country that have retail locations like electric bicycles, like other types of electric motorcycles, and we put our bike in their showroom. So anyone who comes in, or we send them there, they could do demos, they could look at what the bike looks like. Because seeing the bike in person, I think, is a different feeling than seeing it online. We get that a lot.
Yeah.
And so having that presence helps people kind of get across the mental barrier of, hey, I haven't seen it, I haven't sat on it, I can't buy it. The third reason that we don't do dealers, or we're a little bit more resistant to that is the customer experience, right? I think ultimately electric motorcycles are still very new in the United States. It's a new product which requires a lot of knowledge and a lot of handholding, and how we educate the consumers, how we talk about it. And just putting it in a power sports dealer, let's say, may actually end up hurting us, because the information that's transferred to the consumers we don't get to own, and it may not be the right things to say, right? Because the dealership model is very based on accessories, repair. A big part of their business is that.
Hmm.
But electric vehicles don't require much of that. Like, it's not like you're coming in to do oil changes regularly. There's nothing to do. There's your tires and your brakes. Everything else we have to deal with anyways. So we wanted to just deal with it head on, right? And that causes problem. I mean, there's like just the amount of sheer manpower that you need initially is high. So we're trying to navigate through that with partners, and finding ways to do that without having to go through traditional dealerships.
Yeah, I don't blame you because it is a delicate dance that you have to do considering, a lot of times from my experience with going to these dealerships, when I look at the out the door price, there's an extra $2,000 that's a line item that is just kind of vague so that they can make a
Exactly.
little extra
Exactly.
profit. So they
Yeah.
are, obviously, that's not very good for the customer when the customer feels like they're being deceived as far as what they're going to pay
100%.
for it. So
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
complete sense that there's got to be some kind of a delicate dance. Now,
Yeah.
in the comment section of the video that we've had viewers frequently ask about hurdles of EV adoption, in particular in electric motorcycles. I know that you had mentioned that you were like, I'm not going to like this. So, what do you see as the most frequent misunderstandings that you encounter, which are negatively affecting the demand of your products?
Yeah, the biggest thing is range. Like everyone, and this is an interesting one, because we advertise up to 75 miles, and even that is very optimistic. Like, it's, you have to be going at doing all the right things to get that. And when people hear 75 miles, they automatically think that's not enough for me. Like, that's the biggest misconception of. And for some people that is true. Like, some people have 30-mile commutes, and that's really pushing the boundary of going to work and getting home. But we also realize the majority, and we know this with data, right? It's the majority of the customers, or the majority of people in the United States, travel less than 40 miles a day, right? In terms of a work commute, or just going places. And that is something that you can't just tell people and force them to believe, right?
Yeah.
It has to be who we look at and who we target, and how we communicate to our customers. We have to tell them everything up front. Like, all the issues that we think they're concerned about, we have to kind of get out in front. So on our website, we're very clear with the realistic range, right? If you're traveling highway miles, you're getting like 30 miles of range. If you're really conservative, then you get the 75 miles that we're talking about. And we find that because we're upfront about it, and we don't really try to sugarcoat it, the people we get that are interested are already halfway there. Now, the next barrier is cost. Like, it's expensive for electric vehicles, right? We are on the forefront of that a little bit, because we are at a lower price point, right? And until you get down to like the $3,000 price point, that adoption curve is very it's a hockey stick, and how much you,
Mm-hmm.
the lower the price, and it's exponential, right? So we see that with e-bikes. People have no problem buying a $3,000 e-bike, right? Because it's easy, because they don't
Yep.
need a license, they can go anywhere they want. We look at that industry as that is the adoption curve that we want. Like, that, those are the customers that we're targeting, that we're after. They already know two wheels, they know electric, they know how to operate the vehicle. Their only thing is, okay, this is a motorcycle. It's not a bicycle, it's a motorcycle. I need licensing. It goes fast. It's maybe dangerous. Like, it's hard to do. It's costly. Those are all barriers. And then on top of that, it only gets 75 miles of range. That's not great. And so we try to get rid of those barriers by lowering costs, making the bike very easy to use, right? It's twist and go, like a lot of electrics are. But what we also did is made it entry level friendly, right? So you don't get on the bike and have an insane amount of power where it's overwhelming, right? Because 50% of our customers are brand new riders like yourselves, never gotten on a motorcycle before. This is their first time. We don't want to scare them away, right? So they get on. I think the throttle curve on the stock uh, controller, the motor controller is very docile. If you get on it, it feels pretty friendly. The seat lowers so that if you're a shorter rider, or even if you're a taller rider, you can control the bike easier, right? So the accessibility that we built into the product is to attract the customers that we think we can get for EV adoption and motorcycle adoption,
Now,
right?
do you
And
think?
that go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Finish your thought there.
Yeah. So that's really the what we think who we think our customers are is how we design the anthem to really interact with.
Yeah, and completely can relate to that because the experience felt very natural to me as I was riding around on the Anthem. I was like, this just feels like a little bit bigger of an e-bike that I'm already used to riding around. And so far, we've had a lot in our comments of people saying that they're ready to graduate from e-bike to electric motorcycle too. So it does seem like a good audience and opportunity. But I also feel like maybe it is a good opportunity for women like me who might be intimidated. During my safety course, I actually had some women that were in the class, and after the first day, even like after the first portion of the testing, when we were doing the shifting and the
Yeah,
practicing with the
touching. Yeah.
clutch, yeah, they were like very frustrated, and the instructor was just like, "You just got to keep going," and it's like, this is a real
No,
big
I don't.
challenge, and I do think that there's a
Yeah.
better way for accessibility for people that might have the opportunity to kind of remove all that. And we think of that with automatic transmissions, but now in the state of electrification, it can provide more accessibility for people. So
Hmm.
um,
Big
I don't know
time.
if.
No, this is a great point. I want to emphasize on that. We're licensing ultimately is going to be our biggest barrier as well, right? It's easy to buy if you know you don't need a license. It also causes some legal issues with the different states. But
Mhm.
we want to encourage people to go out and take the course that you took, right? And a lot of times they get there and they like, I don't want to learn on a gas bike because I'm never going to ride one. And so we've been kind of partnering up with different schools around the country to get the anthem into their schools. And we've had pretty good success overall. I think there's a lot of interest in EVs. And getting our bikes into those schools is really critical for starting to send our potential customers there to get trained, right? And ultimately turn them into actual customers.
Absolutely. And so do you see that there are some shifts in policy kind of at the state level that would help to get you more prominence in getting people riding on electric motorcycles during the safety courses? Because I feel like there's already a separate auto cycle course.
We found honestly, the same issue with riding schools as with dealers or traditional power sports dealers, right? I think there's a lack of general knowledge or really the willingness to learn what electric motorcycles are. Is this a fairly new thing? Even though Zero's been around for a long time, I think somehow I think the all of these things are starting to come together, and we do see a shift and change where there's a lot more acceptance for electric motorcycle, right? It's like you don't force people to drive a manual car when they go get their driver's license. It should be the
Hmm.
same here, right? Whatever you're riding should be what you get to learn in, and it's just an automatic motorcycle, which all scooters are, right? And so most scooters, and so I think we are able to convince these schools that our product is what people want to learn on, and ultimately it's up to that school to decide if they allow it or not, right? There's no regulation that says you have to have a clutch motorcycle to learn on. It's up to the school to allow that. And so it's a lot of legwork. It's like you got to go around and actually convince them, hey, this is the future and this is where you're going to get more riders through your school, because there's real interest from non-riders to become riders. right? Our industry average for new riders is like 20%, which is very low compared to the 50% we're getting, right? So if anything, I think we're helping the industry kind of get more riders overall, and that's
Yeah,
gonna what it
I
does is
agree.
it take those riders and they're gonna buy the bigger motorcycles. They're gonna buy the gas, but they're gonna buy all the upscale products that eventually save, helps the whole industry. So I think people are starting to see that for sure.
Yeah, and it just creates more opportunity for people, like the accessibility of it and expanding that addressable market, but also the idea that um, more people can enjoy it. And also, I think it would be super beneficial for places like California where you have so much traffic, and to be able to get
Oh
more
man.
people onto two wheels versus four wheels is probably a benefit in a lot of big cities that we would be able to see. So I'm sure you would have a lot to say about that living right there.
Oh, so much, and there's more, right? There's if we talk about efficiency, there's a lot of people that are into EV efficiency, saving the planet. When we look at this, I think let's throw the whole EV thing out the window. Let's just talk about efficiency and how we get around and
Hmm.
how fun it is, right, in general, and how much money we save. Our bike costs like on average like a penny a mile. Like if you look at if you pay for the electricity cost that operates our vehicle, it's a penny a mile. Every
It's
I don't think
crazy.
there's not much more efficiency that you can be had in that, right? And then when people talk about okay, infrastructure, well, there's no charging stations. Well, our bike doesn't require any of that. It plugs into the wall, right? Plugs into your 210, your dryer outlet. It plugs into a J plug adapter that's available almost everywhere in the country right now, right? And it comes off the bike and you can roll it inside if you really needed to, if you didn't have any charging station. I saw you charging at a light pole. That's it's everywhere. Like I used to
That's
live in
what
New
people
York
don't
where
understand, yeah.
yeah, you can just plug in and then the cost is so low, no one cares. It's like 50 cents to charge the bike, right? And so if people start thinking of it like that, it's a lot closer to the bicycle. Like it's if
Mhm.
you want to save money, and a lot of people don't because the entry cost is like 10 plus thousand dollars, but that's not our product. It's $6,000.
Yeah,
It's cheaper than a car. So
it is just, fascinating because when I did my review, it was like 55 cents to fill it up at my house, and I'm like, "That is just
it's
weird to
cheap,
think that I can get a full charge for 55 cents." But,
right?
I wanna talk a little bit more about this battery design because it is so unique, and, it makes a lot of sense now that you're telling us your background with the, mechanical engineering and design elements that you have been focusing on for so long. But can you talk a little bit more about the practical advantages of that innovation that, not only apply now, but for the future, whether that's product or modularity of the battery system? Because that is so unique, and that's one thing that I absolutely fell in love with was the
Mhm.
ability to take it right off the bike and roll it inside, which is great for also protecting it in extreme conditions. I live in Michigan, so when it gets super
Yeah,
cold, I want to be able to bring it in.
yeah, exactly. That's one good point. But when we originally thought, okay, removable battery is not a new thing. There's a lot of companies before us that has done it, right? And how we did it was for two very specific reasons. The first reason was actually about the modularity. For us to produce a bike at scale in California and do it in a way where we can do it profitably, we had to separate some things, right? We would have to separate the battery assembly from the bike assembly. So that was one for manufacturing efficiency. The second one was okay, we're designing this for the current battery, which we know for sure is going to change in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years. How do we separate that from the vehicle itself, like from the architecture? There's a rolling chassis, which is wheels, tires, everything that makes the bike go. Make that as solid as you can, but the battery part is going to be malleable, right? We're going to come up with new batteries. In fact, we already have. From the prototype to now, it's a whole different battery. It has an onboard charger. Like initially, we didn't have that, right? So
Hmm.
we're able to kind of change the battery individually apart from the bike, which allows obviously growth in the company and how we innovate on our battery tech. Like we can have completely different cell chemistries, different BMSs, different batteries altogether to offer in different vehicles. And one of the side effects of that we saw was when we launched our second product, the Outset, it was 80% based on Anthem, right? But I mean, hopefully you get a chance to ride the Outset soon, but it's a completely different bike in how it reacts and how you feel on it It's much more aggressive. It's no longer a commuter. Now it's like a really fun, urban slayer, we call it, on road, off road capable. Totally different market segment, right?
Yeah.
The people who buy outsets are not the same people who buy Anthem. So we don't cross reference, but it's 80% the same bike, including the battery. Right. So we have this thing where, okay, if you bought an Anthem, you really want the outset, you don't have to buy the entire motorcycle with the battery, right? You just buy a rolling chassis, which is significantly less cost for you because the battery is half the cost of the bike.
Hmm.
Then you can take your battery that you have in your Anthem, use it on your outset, and have a whole different motorcycle without breaking the bank. That was a side effect. We didn't intend it to be like that initially, but that's how people are doing it. Right? That's how people are. That's the what we're seeing as behavior. Um, the other thing, one of the really big thing for us is the ability to have some flexibility in where you charge and how you use your battery, right? Because it's an expensive portion of your bike. So what else can you use your battery for? Portable generator, like it's 4.3 kilowatt hours of power just sitting there. Right? And when you're not using it, you have to maintain it anyway. So can you use it for something else? Of course you can. There's a lot of portable generators that people sell that you can buy. It's expensive. Right? It's giant battery essentially. We have that on our bike. We can use that off the bike with an inverter. So we have an inverter kit that we're going to start to sell that goes onto the back of the battery, gives you 110 outlet USB. So when you're not using your bike, you can actually use your battery to power your RV, power whatever your power tool, your laptop, whatever it is that you want to do. It becomes its own product per se, right? It's like the battery, it's a whole nother product than the vehicle. And ultimately, I think a lot of people are probably thinking about that and doing that as well. So I don't think it's novel. I think it's just how we did it. It's slightly different with the wheels and the ability to kind of roll it around easier than having to lift it.
Yeah, and actually some of my favorite e-bikes that I have reviewed have the ability to, buy a separate inverter and then use the bike's battery power to power USB devices like you're saying, but also they have solar kits where you can, if you go out camping or something like that, you can lay out the solar and have it recharge
Quick charge.
via that.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So there's
yeah.
a lot of opportunity there, and we have tons of battery stations where we use them as UPS systems here in our studio. In case the power does go out, then I
Yeah.
have the ability to run all my computer equipment on those types of things. So it's just smart because it adds a value proposition that continues to advance the product. And I love
Hmm.
that you're saying this because I think more companies need to think in that regard, is how can you provide more value with something that's already existing, and like in the case of this battery that you have. Now, what is, if you don't mind me asking, the chemistry that you have in the battery right now and the future chemistries that you're potentially looking into?
Yeah, so we use Ferris's P58 cells. Ferris's has been around for a long time. I think Zero uses them extensively on their vehicles, on their bikes. It's an NMC lithium ion technologies, and one of the reasons we use it is they're pouch cells, right? They're super
Mhm.
high power density, which is a great application for what we're doing because the amount of output in terms of amperage that you can get from these cells are higher than the cylindrical cells and last a little bit longer, right? So we can get more power out of a smaller package and less weight. One of the reasons we went with these cells is they've been around for a long time. They're a proven technology that we know as because Zero has been using them for a long time. I think Zero Mercedes, we use the same cells that are in Mercedes EVs. They're identical cells. And
Cool.
for us, the weight is really important on a product like this, right? Because you can always put in more batteries to get more range, to get more power. But at some point, you're sitting on a 500, 600 pound motorcycle, which is no longer accessible, right? It's like that's a lot of weight to manage. It's not like a Tesla Model 3 where you don't know it's 4,000 pounds and you have no idea. But on a motorcycle, your legs will feel it. And
Yes.
so we made a very, I mean, it's limiting on the range, but the experience of riding is what we were after. Like it wasn't like the fancy touch screens. It wasn't all of these like smart technologies that we were after. It was like what is the raw is like purest form of riding. Like, what do people feel? Because that's what gets people hooked on two wheels, right? They get on, and it's this feeling you get. That's what we really focused on: how the bike handled, how you feel when you're on it, when you're not having to focus on any technology. You're just, it's you going through the air with no sound, right? That's what we want to play up. And then ultimately, you can always layer on top. Like, you can layer on top technology. You can do a lot of things with technology, but all that should be after the base vehicle has been very dialed.
Well, and speaking of that, you have two models right now in the lineup, the Anthem and the Outset, but I'm sure you're going to be expanding the lineup in the future. Is there a specific style that customers have been asking or followers of the brand have been asking for that you feel like would fit in the model lineup?
100%. Outset was definitely one of those. You know, we kind of listened to our customers and looked at our customer groups. And Surons are very popular. Like, all these electric dirt bikes are
Yes.
very popular. One of the things they can't do is legally be on the street, like, actually not get pulled over and, you're plated. So we're trying to fill that gap a little bit. But the next segment that we looked at, and this is initially looking at it, is how do we make it even more accessible, right? Because our bike is still fairly big in size, uh, and we look to companies like Honda, where they really made it accessible is when they came out with, like, the Ruckus and the Grom, right? It's a smaller format. Anyone can get on and feel very comfortable to ride. That's the next evolution, and it's something that we've been working on for a long time. And because we share the modularity of the Anthem, it's essentially, again, probably 70% of the same parts. Just now you have a whole different looking bike with smaller wheels and tires. Speed is, a little bit less, but you get more range. It's a little bit lighter, more controllable, and the cost will be lower, right? It'd be even lower than the $6,000 we have. So we will always ultimately try to get to a more accessible electric product, because that's what we will have to do to really get mass adoption. That's where we're headed.
And I like to hear that because a lot of companies they decide that they need to actually go bigger because they want to get those higher profit margin items, but going smaller is an interesting choice, but could provide you with higher volume, which would also help. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
actually, it's funny that you mentioned both of those products because we had a Suron XX, and that was our first electric dirt bike style that we were like, oh yes, this is
Mhm.
going to be awesome. And I did my full review on that. And then also
Yeah.
before the Suron XX, actually producer Tim had a Honda Ruckus, so and I had a Honda
Oh, nice.
Metropolitan, so
Yeah, yeah.
it
There you go.
actually is like the
I'm
perfect
telling you,
trajectory. It's like I bet you there's
yeah,
tons of people like us that went from scooter,
a
then
hundred
e-bike,
percent.
and then are like, now I'm ready to go faster speeds because around me, I'm in an area where I have to go 55 miles per hour wherever I want to go.
Right.
So,
Right. I want to expand on what you just said there, because I think we say, hey, we're highway capable, but what does highway capable really mean, right? It's here where we are. If you're not going at least 55, you're going to get ran over. Like, even outside of our office here, the speed limit, the city speed, even when it says 35, it's not truly 35. So when we say highway capable, that's just a number. But really, our bike is great for city and urban commuting, just to keep up with the car traffic, right? And so if you're not going faster than like 45 miles an hour, it may be problematic. So yeah, our target audience is really the urban dwellers. It's urban people who live in areas like where you are or where I am, where you need to go faster than 40 miles an hour to get around.
yeah, and I think actually what was one of the benefits that I had said in my review was that you actually advertise it that way. So you're not trying to act like you're selling something that is more than what it's capable of. So I did appreciate that a lot because there's too many companies that do that at
Mm,
this moment in time. But
yeah.
just real quickly on that, because I don't recall if I heard you mention any kind of future chemistries that would enable higher energy density and more performance out of future products. So, is there anything that you're looking at or that you find that holds promise in the future for
Yeah.
specifically electric motorcycles?
We're testing a couple of semi-solid state, right? They're just high silicon content cells, which I think the true solid state cells have a ways to go in terms of. I think it's easy to make one, but for the production capabilities to build out for us to get comfortable enough to use in these types of vehicles, it's probably a little ways out. But I honestly don't think that we need to even go all the way there. Some of the semi solid state cells that we're trying is very promising. And what I think is important for a vehicle like ours is not necessarily the size of the battery. It's really we have to get to a minimum range, which I think is around 100 miles. If we can achieve 100 miles of range at like highway speeds for a motorcycle, that's pretty good. What's really important is the charging time. Like if you can cut that down to 15 minutes, which I think the technology is there now, where you can get for a relatively inexpensive system that's not water cooled and level three. If you can get that charging time down to say 20 to 25 minutes, that's a game changer. Like that's why we put the 3.3 kilowatt charger on our bike, right? Because normal motorcycle, like even a fairly expensive Zero, comes with a 640-watt onboard charger. That takes about 9 hours to charge a 7.2 kilowatt hour battery. Ours, I mean, if you plugged into a level two, it's like an hour 30 minutes, which is for this price point. That's one thing that we don't play up enough, probably, is how fast this thing charges for the price that you're paying. But if you take that hour and a half and cut it down to 25 minutes, that's a major step forward. And that's what we're really looking at in expanding our capability, right? It's semi-solid state that can charge faster without getting too hot, because heat is a big issue,
Hmm.
without increasing complexity. Because if we increase complexity, costs will go up, nobody will be happy, and then we end up with a $13,000 bike anyways,
Hmm.
which doesn't it's not where we want to be. And so one of the things we're also looking at that's much closer is using Ferris's next generation cells, right? They have, ever since we started using their current cells, they've already come up with two more iterations of much more efficient cells. Efficient just means, okay, you can get, for the same cost and weight, you get 2 more kilowatt hours of battery, right? That's what I mean by efficiency. So instead of a 4.3, we can now go up to a 6 kilowatt hour battery without increasing cost and
Yeah, and it
increasing
could
weight.
potentially, even efficiency could mean that you keep a 4.3 kilowatt hour battery, but the
You
cell
charge
improvement
faster.
will you get more range out of it. So
Yeah.
I love to hear that because I am a huge fan of efficiency. It's all about
Yeah.
efficiency, not necessarily just putting a bigger battery in there. So
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
really wonderful to hear. But also, I think there's a lot in perception. There's a lot of people that think that, like, okay, I'm going to ride for, say, X amount of time, and then I don't want to wait to charge for an hour. So that the 20-minute mark is kind of this thing in their head where, like, that's acceptable. But what I
Yeah.
have found when I'm riding around is that, yeah, I'm riding around for a while, and by the time I'm like tired of riding, in
Yeah.
whether it's that position or, whatever, I'm ready to have a little bit of a break. And so time doesn't go as slow as most people expect. But the
Yeah.
mentality
The
is, I
mentality.
can't wait. Yeah. So
I know, it's a
it's
mentality. It's
we hear a lot from
yeah,
brands that are like, we're just not going. We need to change the perception. So I like that you're
we do.
saying as well that no, we're going to improve because there is this barrier for people.
And everyone accepts that a Surron will only go 20 something miles before you run out of juice, or an e-bike can't go that fast and can't go that far. There's acceptance already. So it's not, I think it's the way that we price our product and the way we communicate to our customer to really set that expectation. It's like if we tell our customers that reach out, if your commute is more than 40 miles a day, this is probably not the product for you. Like it's
Hmm.
you have to be able to accept that first. And so we don't have a lot of disappointed customers, right? They knew what they were getting themselves into, and accepts it.
Yeah, and then one last thing that I wanted to ask was, we talked a lot about obviously the engineering of it, but as far as technology integration, it is a very simple. I like it because anybody can ride it, and it's a very simple display and everything like that. But is there
Hmm.
any kind of technology that you're investigating to be able to incorporate? Some brands have apps, some have, Apple CarPlay / Android Auto type of systems in their screens. So is there stuff like that, or do you think that keeping it simple is obviously more beneficial for the cost savings?
No, yeah, I think actually the cost for these technologies is mostly on the back end. It's on the development side, right? The actual cost of the hardware won't be much, and so we fully plan on layering on top different smart technology for the bike. And one of the things that we looked at, and you may not know, is on your battery. It's actually a very smart battery. It has data acquisition on the battery already. We can technically track location if we needed to for a theft return in the future, right? It has all of these things built in that will activate when the time is right. The app development for sure is something we're looking at doing, and then we're going to start development on, and this directly relates to your motor controller and your BMS, how they talk to each other. So the ability for us to turn that on is all on the back end. The existing hardware, the current ASI controller. There's already apps out there that you can use to manipulate your controller. But things like dash cam, the anti-theft that I talked about, where we can geolocate the bikes for people. Uh, there's also safety technology, like okay, when you know pulling the throttle too hard on an EV is one of the things that causes a lot of people to get scared because they don't realize the amount of torque it has. So how
Hmm.
do we ease people into that? Like how do we prevent whiskey throttling? Like how do we give people a better sense of safety when they're riding? Like maybe there's a way to let you know if there's someone behind you with some haptic feedback, right? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at that layers on top that we have every plan of implementing.
Very
And the
cool.
more data we get from the field from customers, the more we can implement.
Well, this has been such a treat. I really appreciate you taking the time, Dong. That's all the time that we have for today, but it has been wonderful not only to experience the Ryvid Anthem, but then also to get a peek behind the curtain, as I said before, to know exactly how this all came together. And the fact that I'm just excited for your future because I want to see more products like this that are more accessible to more people, and I think you're on the right track in my opinion, and it's just very I look very much forward to your future, so thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Lacey. Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching this latest video, and I want to say if you want to check out anything more about the Ryvid Anthem or the outset and keep up to date with Ryvid, you can visit ryvid.misgoelectric.com. And of course, again, I will link our review down in the description below. But until next time, drive, fly, ride. Go electric.